unless otherwise directed. Rachel Kaufman, who is also on the line, if Rachel wants to wave her hand, she's going to serve as our tech support person. She'll be available to respond to any technical issues that may happen through the chat function. And you can find the chat function or the chat button, I should say, at the bottom center of your Zoom window. And so that's going to be how we continue to dialogue and communicate back with one another through this interactive training. So we may invite you to respond to some questions or post comments in the chat during the interactive training, and the chat will be private. So don't be afraid to share your thoughts. It's private, and we're not going to share that after this training. The chats will remain private. However, the training itself will be recorded, but only the person speaking or persons speaking during the training will be recorded. The training will be publicly shared on Greater Richmond Scan's YouTube channel, and you'll also receive a link to this recording along with an evaluation and a certificate of attendance. And if there's any other resources that are that we may have, that will also be shared with you in that email. This will be shared, it will be sent to you all via email, where you will use the email that you all use to register for this training. If you prefer to have this information sent to another email, please feel free to reach out to send a private chat directly to Rachel Kaufman. And again, if Rachel wants to wave her hand, there's Rachel. So those are the Zoom housekeeping notes that I have for us today. And so I think we're ready to get started. I wanted to share a quick background to give a little context of where this training came from. And so some of you all may have participated in trainings with me previously where I've done a trauma-informed family engagement training. This training is an adaptation from that. That original training was initially created for school environments where we supported the school systems to strengthen their relationships between home and school. And so we know that we're in a very special time, if you will, where we are being faced with something that many of us have never faced before. And so wanted to talk about family engagement in a very specific way about how do we continue to engage families through a pandemic such as the one we're in now, COVID-19. And so we hope that this training will be a resource for you, whether you're a parent, a caregiver, a helping professional, just helping in any role that you are. We want this to hopefully be a resource where it can help strengthen your engagement with others during not just now, but also beyond. And so that's a little background or a context of how we decided to come up with creating this training. Also, if you've ever taken a training with any of our SCAN trainers, you know that it's customary that we always like to begin with a grounding technique. And so we'll do the same today. So for the next 60 seconds, I invite you all to join me in a quick mindfulness breathing exercise. And this one is called Take 5. And so just like you see right on your screen, we're going to do a Take 5 breathing. So you're going to hold out your hand. Hopefully you can see mine. And I like to use my less dominant hand and use the pointer finger of my dominant hand. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our pointer and trace it up and down our fingers. Breathing up, breathing in, as you go up, and breathing out as you go down. And so let's take the next few moments to breathe in as we go up and to breathe out as we go down. Try to go as slow as you can so you can notice how it feels. You can close your eyes if you would like, or lower your gaze. Very nice, very nice. I would ask how you feel. You don't have to share out if you don't want to, but I do hope that you feel a little more relaxed than you did when you first joined this training. We like to do that to center ourselves, to kind of regain focus, and to shake off any nerves that any of us may have. And feel free to use this again as a resource. We know that we're all trying to find ways to cope and to regulate and to relax. And so deep breathing is one of my favorites. And I love the Take 5 because it also adds the sensation of touch. And so thank you for doing that with us. And I'm going to turn it over to Tamika to share our training objectives.
Okay, thank you. Essentially, our objective is to reinforce why family engagement is important and how doing so with a trauma-informed lens makes it much more impactful and meaningful. And especially during this time, I know everyone is dealing with so many things going on right now, and parent and family engagement was already, a task within itself. But to add on us going through this national crisis is something else. So, we just really wanted to come up with something to give you guys a tool, guys, something to go off to get you through this rocky time. So we will discuss strategies on how to build trusting and positive relationships with families and those in helping professions or in a helping role. And we want to define and seek to understand trauma-informed family engagement and explore the 4 C's as a strategy on how to connect and support our families. And the next 3 slides that you guys will see may be familiar to some of you, if not all of you, but we just wanted to lay the foundation to the 4 C's so that everybody was on the same page. And I'm going to toss it back to you, Olivia.
Let's see, am I unmuted? Very good. Thank you, Tamika. Really appreciate that. So just like she said, the very first few slides are going to be probably review for many of us, but we thought it would be helpful that we start off by posing the question, what is family engagement, so that we can all make sure that we have a common idea or understanding of what family engagement is before we even talk about what trauma-informed family engagement is. And so we chose to add this first definition that you see on the slide because we really thought that it highlighted a lot of the elements that we believe are important to engaging families or doing the work of family engagement. And those elements are being family-centered or person-centered, understanding that family engagement is strength-based, and that it's important that we view families as experts of their own unique situations or challenges. We got this definition from childwelfare.gov, but we are aware that there are probably so many different definitions out there, family engagement, so many different ways to describe it. And so Tamika and I tried our own hand at kind of coming up with another way, another working definition, if you will, of what we believe family engagement is, and would love for you to share in a moment if you have other ideas of what family engagement is. So Tamika and I, we said that family engagement is the collaboration between families and helping professionals or community providers that helps drive family success and increasing their overall health and well-being. And so obviously a much shorter definition than that first one, but that was another way that we view family engagement. Are there other ways that you view family engagement? Feel free to use the chat at this time. How do you define or describe family engagement? I'll take a few moments to see if there's any responses. And again, this is voluntary. You do not have to respond if you don't want to, but I invite you to if you would like to do so. I think I see one response. Figure out how to get to. Okay. Strong communication is, I see someone said that family engagement is strong communication, and it should aim to empower families. Thank you to everyone who's responding so far. We agree. Strong communication is absolutely important to family engagement, and the aim should be to empower families. I like it. It's built on trust, absolutely, and we'll definitely be getting to that. It's also acknowledging
to achieve the family goals.
Absolutely, connecting to achieve the family goals, acknowledging the strengths of the family during the process, which empowers families. Thank you so much. Those are great responses, and I think that is really the gist of what we believe too family engagement is, and we're actually going to dig deeper, take a deeper dive into some of those elements that you just mentioned, such as the trust, the communication, empowering families. So thank you all very much. And we're going to advance to the next slide, hopefully. And also review the 4 R's as well. Tamika, I think this is you.
Yes, it is. I imagine by now, many of us, if not all of us on this Zoom, is very familiar with SAMHSA's trauma-informed approach, the 4 R's. And they realizes the widespread impact of trauma and understands potential paths for recovery. Recognizes the signs and symptoms of trauma in ourselves, clients, families, staff, and others involved with the system. Responds by fully integrating knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices, and seeks to actively resist trauma. I'm sorry, guys. My computer is acting strange. And I can't find my video.
Did you need help with something, Tamika?
No, it's there.
Okay.
I'm sorry, guys. So, this framework of this trauma-informed approach by SAMHSA is the approach that we are aligning ourselves with, and it is also adopted by the state of VA. And so when we say trauma-informed family engagement, we mean that engagement is done in a way that is sensitive and respectful to every person's or family situation. Trauma-informed family engagement is about families and community workers collaborating and sharing responsibility to ensure the success and well-being of each individual and family. So in all of the work that everyone is doing right now, how do you see yourself incorporating the 4 R's and reaching out to your families that you serve?
I would like to add, Tamika, that, the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about the 4 R's is the first one, the realizing. I know we talk about, we incorporate the 4 R's in the work that we do on a regular basis, but especially during COVID-19, like the realizing the widespread impact of trauma, it just, the first thing that I think about is that we're all, we're all being impacted by COVID-19. And we may be impacted in different ways, but that first R really speaks to understanding the wide aspect that we're all being impacted by COVID-19 in so many different ways, and that this training hopefully helps us figure out, helps us to identify ways or find those potential paths for recovery. So I think that, really speaks to me. And I think we might have some additional responses in the chat.
Yes, we do. It says, okay, this is going too fast. Acknowledge the potential anxiety during this COVID-19 pandemic and thinking about basic needs first before considering other issues.
Right.
Another colleague stated, recognizing the symptoms in myself and others. And one more that really stuck is, I try and focus on and respond to the resilience of my families and community.
Right. And that's important. I see, I saw one more remark that I would think is important to share too, saying, one person said, really just to remind myself that I and my kids are no different than the families I serve. We all want the same thing and share many of the same experiences. So again, thank you for everyone for who's responding. And I think that's really why we wanted to just make sure we covered the 4 R's again, to show how even in this time that those 4 R's really speak to the approach, of that trauma-informed approach, and how we go about taking care of ourselves and being a support to our community.
So that brings us to, why is trauma-informed family engagement important? And I'm going to get into a personal little tidbit of mine that relates to this slide. As me being a mother of 4, I've had many struggles, with the school system. And for so long, we always try to figure out why we were not being successful. And what we came to realize is that even though I implemented something at home, it wasn't being translated across the board, and vice versa. If the school implemented something and we weren't communicating with each other, it wasn't being implemented at home. So I noticed that you have to have some consistency all around the board with every interaction, and that goes for the home, community, and in the school. And as I'm starting to see during this pandemic that we're going through, when everybody is on the same page, wonderful things can be done. That people at home are becoming more willing to participate, to give feedback. The community is stepping up at an all-time high. All sorts of businesses, small businesses, big corporations, the schools are, I can't even begin to speak on what the teachers are doing to ensure they're going above and beyond for their students, just to give them some sense of normalcy during this crisis that we're facing. So I just think that now more than ever, and even going forward in our lives once this is over with, that it's really important that when you speak about family engagement, that these 3 things do overlap. They do matter. You can't have one without the other and expect a good outcome. So I just think going forward, just remember that all 3 of these things matter, and to keep an even playing field across the board to get your best possible results when you're speaking on engagement.
Absolutely, that's really important, Tamika. And while you were speaking, I was even just looking back at some of the comments in the chat as well. And as we continue to go further and talking about trauma-informed family engagement and why it's important, I see one comment that says that, when going back to those 4 R's, the R, recognize, that it's important to recognize the effects of the current situation and how it impacts families differently, and that we need to ask the questions, is this considered a traumatic experience for some? That it may be for some and it may not be for others. And so I thought that was worth sharing to everyone if they hadn't seen that comment as well. And I would just add to that, we all have a shared responsibility, like you were saying, Tamika, that whatever sphere we might find ourselves, whether we're in the community, the home, the school, or in all, they overlap. And so we all kind of have this shared responsibility to support and to work together to reach that common goal, or to, you know, to empower that individual, that family in the way that needs to be done. But it takes a collaborative effort. So I really appreciate you sharing your personal experience and how this really, you know, is important. There we go. I'm sorry for the delay, you all. I'm trying to make sure. I'm having a few glitches, but I think we are still on track. And so as we've talked about, we've set the foundation now, where we've talked about what is family engagement and what do we mean by trauma-informed family engagement, and why is it important. We want to kind of continue to go further in the conversation of what does it take, or what does it mean to create authentic, positive relationships. And what you see on the screen right now is just a very short, brief list of the different things that come to our mind when we think about what does it take to create authentic relationships. And from this list is where we actually were able to come up with the 4 C's that we're really going to take a deeper dive in. It was from this list, and also from an inspiration from a spiritual leader that I'm connected with, where the 4 C's, compassion, communication, care, and creativity really came about, where the 4 C's were conceived. It was from us just making a list, and we say, you know what, these 4 C's really, to us, have greater meaning. They were already important, but have even greater meaning now, and we wanted to kind of explore those on a deeper level, especially as it relates to how we're all being impacted in our various ways during COVID-19. But before we get to the 4 C's, we don't want to ignore the role and the importance of trust, which is why we have it underlined, because trust is important. And really, without that trust, we really don't have much to build on. So we don't want to ignore that trust is important in the creation of authentic, positive relationships. And I think Tamika is going to share a little bit more with us about trust.
So I think we can all agree that in our line of work, no matter if we're working in a school system, the community, any kind of setting where you're trying to engage families, trust is always at the center of how those relationships will be formed. I can even speak to myself. I never understood how much it took to form relationships until I started working, or until I came into contact with people who really took this serious. And it takes a lot. It really does. It takes time and effort and a whole lot of patience on both ends. And I think it starts with believability. You know, do your actions appear genuine to everybody? Are you making your community and the people that you serve feel like, you know, they really matter? Or are you coming across as, okay, I'm just doing what I need to do to meet quota or to get things done? And that translates to when your actions are shown to be genuine, and your credibility kicks in when it's done on a consistent basis. And I know for me, just having someone that was there consistently, even just giving me 5 minutes of their time that they didn't even have, 5 minutes of when they were off the clock, just to say, hey, how you doing? Just checking in on you. And them doing that on a regular basis, I was like, wow, like this person really cares for me. I'm not just somebody that they're trying to, you know, another number to them, so to speak. And once those 2 things are done, they will start to see you as being credible in their eyes. And that's how those relationships, those bonds, that trust is built between anybody. And I think, like I said, in family engagement and anything that we're trying to do, trust is always at the center. Because if you don't have trust, no matter how good your intentions are, it will not come across.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Tamika. And I would just also want to add to about creating those authentic, positive relationships. That family engagement, again, is strength based. And so we want to remind ourselves of how, when we're talking, when we're wanting to be helpful and finding those ways to build or even maintain relationships with the families that we work with, that it's important, as someone stated even early in the comments, that we want to be non-judgmental. Other ways to kind of help us with this is acknowledging families as experts of their own unique situations and challenges. We always want to go in as the learner, going in as a learner and practicing reflective listening, or, that's part of active listening. Asking positive questions, not making the assumptions that we know what the issues are or how one is being affected, or making the assumption that a particular event or situation is even traumatic, as someone shared earlier in the comments, that we want to go in as listeners. We want to ask questions, but even positive questions of what's going well, what are those strengths, and not going in with a deficit, mind or way of thinking. Remembering all families have strengths. And so it might even be part of our role to even help families recognize and identify their own strengths. And so, and again, trust is at the foundation of that, is at the center. And so we appreciate, Tamika, I appreciate you making sure that we talked about trust before we continue on with the 4 C's. And so the 4 C's, as Tamika stated earlier, family engagement, or trauma-informed family engagement, as we're stressing, really, it takes more time, effort, and intentionality. And so we hope that we will talk about the importance of the time, the effort, and intentionality as we go through these 4 C's, which are communication, compassion, creativity, and care. I also want to bring your attention to this image on the right-hand side of your screen. Hopefully, when you all registered for the training, you saw the link below, the registration link for the My Action Steps guide. We created this because we wanted to help. Foster some brainstorming and planning with writing down how you plan to or hope to incorporate the 4 C's in your family and the work that you do in your community. So feel free to use that guide, whether you use it now while we're going through the 4 C's, or if you want to use it as a reflection tool afterwards. But we really encourage you to use that to write down how you see yourself, or how you plan to use these 4 C's in the spaces that you live, work, and I want to say play. Hopefully we're still playing, even though it may not be outside. So we want to use that. And I don't know, I'm gonna ask a quick question to Rachel. Rachel, would it be possible if those were not able to access this guide from the flyer, is it possible to share a link in the chat, or am I asking for too much?
Nope, I just did that. So we're on the same mind path.
Okay, wonderful. So everyone, if you were not able to get this before the training, Rachel just shared a link to this My Action Steps guide. So feel free to follow along and jot down your notes and your reflections. So let's get started with the first C, communication. All right, Tamika?
I was just muted.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So communication plays a big part it's a very vital part in engagement, family engagement, community engagement, any type of engagement. Communication is always going to be a key piece. So we want to talk about, methods of communication, how to communicate your feelings and emotions, information sharing, and accessibility. because those 4 key points are going to play a major part in how the message is received, or if it even is received by your target audience. So one of my questions are, how are we communicating with our families during this crisis? And while we're waiting, I know for me, I still have phone numbers, so I know we create little group chats as parents and colleagues and community members. We create little group chats just to check in and say, hey, how you doing? Is everything okay? Does anybody need anything? Just the little things like that. Staying in contact with each other during this trying time is what I found to be, very helpful for me to stay engaged with my community. I see phone calls and Zoom mainly. I agree. Telehealth, snail mail, that's a first.
Yeah, that's good.
Letters to home. Okay.
Nice.
Okay, so with all of these great things that I'm saying, have any of you ran into any barriers in communicating with your families? Okay, yeah, that's a big one. Lack of internet access. Difficult to engage children for meaningful chats. Oh, no, I understand that one during this time. Disconnected phones, that's a big one. Parents are at work.
We saw another one that, families move around. So oftentimes it may be hard to keep up with addresses and contact information from families that probably have to move constantly. And I think we wanted to also invite one of our colleagues to also chime in on this one.
Yes. So I will be introducing Amy Johnson. She's our trauma-informed specialist. She works within the Henrico County School System, and she will be sharing her thoughts on communication.
Thanks, Tamika. So just thinking about, communicating with families, so reflecting on just my professional role when working with students and families, and also just as a parent too, and then bringing in maybe a little bit of the mental health as well. I think everything that, echoing everything that people were sharing, that, the communication should always be, non-judgmental, empowering, strengths-based, and really considering kind of meeting, people where they're at. I think there's 2 big things that stand out to me that I think are really important when thinking about communication is we need to keep communicating. Like I've expressed to others that I think this social distancing, even how we keep talking about that, it almost implies that, we should distance ourselves from one another. Physically, yes, maybe, but socially, no. We need to keep communicating. We need that connection now more than ever. Like you guys, echoing what you guys said, as far as there's online platforms and really thinking about what parents are using, more like the FaceTime, Skype, Facebook, Instagram. We've even had like YouTubes that we've done so that we can, better access, but even like phone and text, there's tons of online group supports. So like support groups, or there's even faith-based groups. There's also, there's DJs that have been volunteering their time that just kind of bring normalcy to this time that just doesn't feel normal, but we're all still socially gathering and connecting with one another through the use of music and other organizations that you can find online. As some folks mentioned, snail mail, cards, notes, letters. I had a friend surprise me with a mailbox drop off, and like that made the day, or even, dropping stuff off on porches. Physically distance visiting. So my mother goes and visits my 90-year-old grandmother and sits outside of her window, and they just talk on their phone, but just being able to visually see each other and be, in closer connection with one another. I spent some time in a parking lot, in our cars with a friend, just so I could see, sorry, my dog is wanting to communicate with me right now. I apologize. The stressors of working at home. But parking lots, parades, like drive-throughs, you know, just driving by, I noticed that when I do family walks in the evening, how many people are just outside and just waving and talking to them, you know, at driveway length and just checking in on each other. Those that you're living with, make sure that you're doing regular check-ins with each other. You know, adults, when we're thinking about the adults we live with, you know, communicating in their form. Not all of us like to talk. So when my husband comes home and I tell him, hey, let's go for a walk, that's my way of communicating to him, like, I'm feeling a little stressed right now. I need to take this time. Thinking about our adolescent and teen groups, they're not big talkers all the time. So really thinking about how can you connect to them on their level and on their terms. I know sometimes I'll do check-ins with them through sending them like funny memes or something through social media. I also created a checklist for my kiddos that is really what we're calling like the quarantine checklist, which is self-care items. So are you getting physical exercise today? Have you connected with some friends socially, you know, through online forums? Are you doing something that you enjoy each day? So that way it doesn't seem like the mom that's nagging them. They have the things that they know that they need to do each day, and it's still a form of communicating with them. And then really understanding that our littles, that, you know, engaging with them and communicating with them through playful means during this stressful time. And then thinking about our own self-talk, like how are you communicating with yourself right now? What messages are you telling yourself? This is when you need to be kind to yourself and really cut yourself some slack. That nothing that we're doing is normal or our typical norm. And then also I think it's important to normalize what folks are communicating. Many families are experiencing increased stress and anxiety, and we need to validate those feelings. It's not about trying to fix, you know, that what's going on with them, but just really trying to honor where people are at. And, you know, I was talking to a family member that was experiencing, you know, homeless, and just really kind of listening to her and being supportive so that she knew, you know, me saying, oh, it's all going to be okay, that would be very dismissive towards her. So really validating what she was going through, communicating, you know, my care and compassion through listening and validating and just holding space for her. And then just showing that support and understanding. Again, when you think about children and adolescents, you know, the young children, you may see them communicate with you their stressor by maybe acting out behaviors. So like irritability, maybe some clinginess, anger. Sometimes you could even see regressive type behaviors like bedwetting. So the young children then are communicating, you know, I'm overwhelmed. And then in the way that they know how, they're not going to always use verbal language. So what we need to do in those times is communicate support, love, and connection, and then reassure safety with them. So, you know, and it's even okay to let them know that you're having big feelings too. Like, you know, things are hard for me too, but I'm here to help you and we're going to keep you safe and we're in this together. Again, you know, communicating with the adolescents and teens, you may see a lot of irritability with them, not wanting to express feelings, you know, understanding and communicating to them how their worlds have changed and that things look really drastic right now, and offer support. Again, letting them do it in their ways. I know that music is a big one. I have one daughter that is very big into creative expression, so journaling and using art, and then just, you know, allowing that space for them. So if they need or when they're ready. So those are kind of some of my top thoughts with communication.
That's great. Tamika, I had a quick question that I thought might be appropriate to ask now while Amy is still with us. Do you mind if I ask that real quick? I know you may have had a follow-up question.
No, that's perfectly fine.
So I saw, I'm looking in the chat, and so I got a message where it says that there may be a lot of us right now who are trying to reach out to families, but we're probably, but some of us may say no one's responding to me, or I'm not getting a response. Can we take this time to possibly address or maybe give some explanations as to why families may not be responding right now? That, you know, and I think Amy really touched on how we're all being impacted differently. But why may families not be responding right now? For those service providers or helping professionals who may not be getting a response, what reasons could that be?
Do you want me to speak on that a little?
If you could, Amy.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I know that when I've had difficulty reaching families as well. And when I did have reached some, you know, I'm just like, how are you guys? I'm just checking in. And immediately sometimes the family's like, hey, I didn't have time to do that packet. You know, we're going to get on that Zoom call. And so I think it's like feeling the pressure of, oh no, I'm not meeting demands and needs and I can't, you know, I don't even have the energy to kind of answer to that right now. And I reassured them, no. The question was, I want to know how you are, and it's okay. And we don't even have to discuss schoolwork right now, because until you're okay, then none of this really matters. So just really reassuring them and meeting them. If our basic needs are not met, we can't build off of that. Stress brains cannot learn. And so right now we have families in crisis. We have families that have loss of childcare, loss of job, loss of income. I mean, there's so many things we're struggling with: food insecurity, home insecurity. There's no way to throw academics demands on top of that right now. So it's really meeting each family where they are. I mean, even in my household, I was a 2-parent household, and there's stressors here. And there's been times that I'm too overwhelmed to meet the demands. So just really recognizing that everybody is doing the best that they can right now, and that it has to go back to doing that check-in first. And so that's what I've seen. I think that parents were just afraid that I'm calling to check in to, why aren't you getting on the Zoom calls? Like your child hasn't turned in, you know, homework. And I just tried to reassure, no, I'm calling to check in to see what you guys need, and just to know that I'm still here even when school's closed.
Thank you, Amy.
Sure.
Just to piggyback real quick off of what she said, what Amy said, you hit that dead on. As being a behavior community health organizer, I find myself being on social media a lot, just because people express a lot of thoughts and feelings on there. And the parent, she got on there yesterday and she was frustrated. She's still working. She has 3 children, all in different grades. So she's trying to figure out how she's going to navigate to pick up school packets, get them on calls, and all of this. And she was extremely frustrated. And not one time was she able to mention, you know, they, you know, checked on her. Like you said, how is everything? She was just extremely frustrated because she's dealing with all of these things in a 2-parent household. But her main thing is she wants her children's education to continue. So she feel like she's slacking or she's not doing enough. So I think what you said was spot on about what they need right now.
Thank you. And then that's like, even just thinking of myself as a parent, there's been times that it's too much. You know, I'm working, dad's working, and, you know, school is still somewhat continuing for them, but, you know, the kids are stressed and feeling the stress and the tension in the house too. So just allowing that flexibility.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you so much, Amy. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, ladies.
Yes. So I'm gonna throw it over to you, Olivia, for the second C.
Great. And so for the second C, we want to, you know, center our attention on compassion as well. As you've already heard, that even in how we communicate and what we're communicating, compassion is necessary, is needed, always, but especially during this time. And when I think of compassion, the first thing that comes to my mind is empathy. And I saw not too long ago on a Facebook post this quote, if you will. And the reason why I have author unknown is because I didn't really get permission from the person. Well, I didn't get clarification whether the person whose Facebook page I seen this post on didn't clarify whether it was their words or not. So I'm just going with the unknown author. But that person said for them, empathy is being conscious that everybody is making an adjustment to the climate of COVID-19. And so I think that empathy really is vital, is really important at this time, especially as we talk about compassion. And so I want to invite another colleague of ours to join to unmute herself and join us in this discussion, and that's Amanda Lynch. Amanda Lynch is also a trauma-informed specialist with Greater Richmond SCAN, as well as with the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Richmond. And she too is a parent, and so I just want to invite her to join in on this conversation as we talk about compassion. And so, Amanda, are you there?
I'm here. Hey, everybody.
Hey.
And so my question to everybody on the training, but Amanda would love for you to voice your responses. What is compassion to you, and what should it look like for us during this time of COVID-19?
Well, I think compassion goes beyond empathy. So like for me, you know, looking at sometimes people can pity situations that others are in, right? And so, oh, you know, I feel bad for you. And then moving on to sympathy, I sympathize, you know, with what you're going through. So I may give you a card, you know, a pat on the back, and kind of just leave it at that. And then with empathy, being able to walk in someone's shoes, and so you may feel lost for them. But really with compassion, it's then the action that you take, right? So sort of like a natural progression of those things. Compassion, literally, the literal definition is experiencing suffering with someone. But that has to start with ourselves. And so if we're not able to show compassion to ourselves, it's very difficult to do that for others. When I say that, I was talking to my 13-year-old daughter, you know, just asking her like what she thought compassion was. Like, how does she as a teenager show herself compassion? And she said, you know, Mom, it's the I statements that you make us do every day. You know, with the I am kind, I am beautiful, I am. And so just reaffirming, because I make my kids do that in the car on the way to school in the morning. And so just reaffirming those things for yourself. It's also in those moments where you might lose your temper because one of your 4 children is screaming in the background while you're on a Zoom call. So acknowledging that you're not a bad parent, even if you're having a bad moment. And just being kind to yourself. I was on another Zoom call this morning, and the moderator was talking about like the importance of touch and hugs, and how different endorphins are released through positive touch. And we're not able to get that same kind of thing right now because of social distancing. So just making sure that you connect with people the way that we're doing right now, to be able to see one another and show kindness to each other, but then also respecting privacy. So, you know, if you have a family that you're working with, or even one of your own kids, making sure that you're respecting those boundaries and that privacy as well. I would invite, you know, you all to share like how you during this time are showing yourself compassion. I know for me, acknowledging when I need a break. So I can't make every meeting that's scheduled. And so, because I'm also trying to balance, you know, all of my kids being here, being in different headspaces. One is lost part of her kindergarten year, another's lost part of college. And so, you know, just recognizing and showing compassion, not only to my kids, but for myself, knowing that I need to go out inside and walk, just to acknowledge that. And just because I can't do everything that I may have been able to do before, doesn't make me a bad parent or coworker or colleague. And so just being kind to myself as well. And you all can either share in the chat or unmute yourself. I'd love to hear your voices as well, to just share like, you know, some things that you might be doing to show compassion to yourself. It's really important to be able to do that before we try to give that to others. We can't pour out what we don't have to give.
Awesome. And I see some responses coming in, Amanda. Someone also said using the mantra, I am doing the best I can, has been really helping. I'm trying to be kinder. I listen to my body to figure out what I need. Taking time
So
to
the center and family daycare home settings, creating a successful outdoor space, suitable service.
And I got my daughter, my 5-year-old said this morning, because my 3-year-old was crying about, she wanted something for breakfast. I gave that to her. She didn't want it. So, going through that whole thing. And my 5-year-old said, mommy's just one person. And so recognizing that, I'm just one person. And so we're not working from home by choice. We're working from home because of a global crisis. And so, recognizing that this is not something that we have chosen to do. And there are going to be good moments, and then they're not going to be as great of moments. And so just being able to acknowledge that, draw from our toolkits. I see someone saying about breathing and with intention, and even setting an intention for yourself for the day. Trying to look through the chat responses. So those are just some of the ways that I have tried to show myself compassion. And then with working with families, with talking to families to find out things that they need, trying to figure out how I can fill some of those gaps. So if we have families that need masks or food, or being able to meet our families where they are, and create actions that allow for some of those needs to go, to be met. I love doing positive affirmations and setting up a schedule for my kids. Our schedule is very, very flexible, but one of the things we do on a daily basis is state an intention, and also to be able to make I statements. And so every day, everyone in my house does an I am statement. And then we kind of cheer each other on, about what our statement is. And so just be, having those things be reminders as we work through this process. Everything's not going to be perfect. And we're all just doing the best that we can do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Amanda. I really appreciate that. And I see more continue responding. That's great. We may not be able to read everyone's response, but I really appreciate you participating with us and sharing. These are really helpful. And I would add too, one thing that I really feel like I've kicked up into gear is really practice, in addition to the positive affirmations, is really doing a lot of gratitude acknowledgement. And so reminding, like I might say, man, I'm really stressed, or I feel tense. But then I also follow that up saying, but I'm still grateful. I'm grateful. And so it's like me recognizing, being able to hold all truths, really. So being able to recognize, like you said, those not so great moments, those big feelings, but then also holding that space for gratitude, and that's what kind of helps keep me going, and how I practice self-compassion. And I also just want to add, before we move on to our next C as well, is that the reason why we're talking about, I think it was important that Amanda brought up self-compassion, because that we hopefully, for me, I can only speak for myself, but hopefully it works this way for some of you all too, is that it allows us to keep going, right? It kind of helps build our strength. Because when I think of compassion, not just for ourselves, but for others, it's like we need to also make sure we're either filling our cups, or making sure that the people in our networks are also helping to fill our cups, and that we're also receiving compassion from others, so that we can continue to have enough to give out, to be able to move beyond the space that we're in. I just wanted to add a few more tidbits too about compassion, that this might be a time for us to even practice forgiveness. It might be a space where we might want to do some reflection of forgiving ourselves for some things, or maybe forgiving others. It's definitely, I don't want to say a time as if this isn't something we shouldn't do or haven't been doing, but I think this time is a great reminder of how much love is important, and how we show love. So when I think of compassion, I oftentimes I think love is synonymous with that. Is that it's about love, how we show love to ourselves and others, not placing blame, maybe extending some forgiveness to ourselves and others, and extending ourselves beyond our comfort zone. And so I really appreciate you again, Amanda, for sharing your insight and your expertise on this. We're going to move because I know our time is running. So we have 2 more C's that we want to try to get through. And that next C is creativity. And so I imagine that we have all had to figure out some new, unique, and creative ways to stay connected with our families and find some creative ways to support ourselves, our own families, and others. And so I found this on the slide. I found this image with the quote on it that says, "Creativity requires the courage to let go of certainties." And we're certainly in a time of uncertainty. And though I believe that nothing is ever truly certain, I think we're experiencing a greater level of uncertainty as we all go through COVID-19. And so wanted to add this C in because we know that we have probably all had to either step out of ourselves or maybe even go deeper within ourselves to figure out how now am I able to encourage myself and others, and how can I get creative in doing that, whether it's through communication like we talked about earlier, creative with showing compassion, but then creativity in general in every aspect of our lives. I listed just a couple of just a few examples of maybe different activities or ways we can, we've probably had to go back and re-explore, re-examine of how we can and find ways to cope and encourage others to cope through different activities such as music, storytelling, drawing. I put down curriculums, but not necessarily academic curriculums, but just different ways of going about teaching or being taught. Movement, cooking, what is resting looking like? How are we finding new ways to rest, and then fellowship or to commune and connect with each other. I thought that this was really important to add and to incorporate in the 4 C's because, and I'm sorry, I lost my page here with my notes, excuse me, because I wanted to really to offer this to us, that creativity really, for me, it lies within us all. And so if you're like me, I sometimes say I'm not that creative, but truly creativity definitely lies within us. And this time of physical distancing, as Amy made sure that we understand that we might be physically distant, but we still need to be social. We are social beings. And so this time lends an opportunity for us to actually reach inward so that we can produce something outward. I'm a social worker, and in the field of social work, we're often taught about the use of self, the power of self, and how to use ourselves, especially in moments of crisis or adversity. How do we use ourselves? And we often talk about this in the context of working with our clients or patients. And so a question that you can add, you can feel free to share in the chat, is how are you creatively using yourself these days? What memories are we creating out of these moments? I know we probably all heard the saying, necessity is the mother of innovation or intervention. And certainly there is a lot of needs right now. There's been a lot of loss. There's a lot of lack. And we have witnessed how the need or necessity really has birthed innovation and intervention. A lot of us have gone back to, not me, because I don't know how to sew, but many people have had to go back to what they, their talents and their skills and their gifts of sewing and making masks, or, writing letters, postcards, poetry, sending different words of encouragement. People are doing parades, car parades, as Amy mentioned earlier. So finding so many different ways to, again, encourage ourselves and others and how does creativity play a role in that. And so this is a great time for us to really move into our imagination. It's a good time for us to really move into depths and into the depths of our thinking about how we can create or bring about what has probably been lying dormant in us for some time. And so really digging, this is, I think, a time where we can go deep inside within ourselves and again, produce something outwardly, create something, or to use our creativity. And I think I want to reach back out to Amy, who's still on the line. Amy, or Amanda had some closing questions that I invite others on the Zoom to respond via the chat, but either Amy or Amanda really quickly wanted to ask, how have you been using creativity to encourage yourself and others? It's a two-part question. The last one, how are you helping families to tap into their own creativity?
So the way that I've been using it for myself and even in my home is kind of as a coping skill. I find that in a world that feels very out of control, me creating kind of what I want and what feel like there is control in that. And so being able to self-express in a way that that feels good to me and that I have control over, and then like seeing a finished product and kind of having that satisfaction and accomplishment, knowing that it's something that came, from me in a time that I've heard a lot of people say that there's a lot of loss of meaning or satisfaction because, everything has shifted. It brings me great meaning to see this product that I have created, whether it be I've kind of challenged myself lately. So whether it be painting something in my house or creating a new piece of furniture, just pushing myself to find meaning in other ways. And I find it brings me to the present. So when I'm working on something, I'm very focused and it brings me to the here and now. So I find myself very grounded in that work. And then one of my daughters also is not much about verbal expression, but she can journal or draw amazing things that really are very expressive and kind of give insight into kind of what she's going through. So that's how we've been using it in our house.
Awesome. And we have two additional responses to that I think is worth sharing. Someone says there's so much hope and creativity. Recognizing that we can create community and build connections, imagining a different future coming from these difficult times. And someone else said reading has been their creative way of encouraging themselves and using imagination to get away from current challenges. So thank you for those who are posting. And so, Amy, with the last question about how are we helping families to tap into their creativity, did you have any final thoughts on that one?
Yeah, so just like creative means like, even if you're doing a Zoom call with kids, connecting with them and having them draw things, like what are you feeling right now? Like, or, draw kind of what you're feeling right now. So using creative expression that way. So not just, doing some sort of check-in, fun check-in that way, playful activities. Let's see, where, this is a time that like the children or the students could lead some of these things, like, spend some time telling me about something that interests you, or draw out something, or playing charades, but just really tapping into their creativity and letting them have kind of the lead, which is not typical of what they're used to, but then kind of allowing them that little bit of control and kind of autonomy to decide kind of maybe how you open up a Zoom meeting or something with them.
Thank you so much. And so we're going to move on to our final C, and that's care. And Tamika is going to take us to the end of our presentation. And Tamika, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So the fourth C is care.
Okay, so as you guys can see, we pulled up the noun definition and the verb definition. As you can see, the noun definition is the provision of what is necessary for the health, welfare, maintenance, and protection of someone or something. But what we mainly want to focus on is the verb, the action behind care, which is to look after and provide for the needs of. So I know speaking for myself, when I think about care, I've had to learn to put the self in front of it and demonstrate self-care. Because even with me being a parent, I had to realize that I cannot overwhelm myself. I cannot overdo it. If I do that, I will be of no benefit to my children, myself, or any of the people in the community that I'm trying to serve. So I found myself making sure I keep my telehealth appointments, to keep my therapy every once a week, because I need that outlet. And that's the only way I'm going to be any good to give any type of help to the people who are dealing with other issues during this crisis. So just making sure I take deep breaths in between what I'm doing. I think Amanda stated, I can't make every meeting, and I've become okay with that. I was putting pressure on myself that, oh, I need to be in this meeting. I need to get to this meeting. I feel bad. I didn't join this meeting. And then I had to realize I'm one person. And if I'm going to be at my best, then I have to take care of myself. So just making sure I eat, I take my deep breaths, I rest. That's been a big thing for me, making sure that I rest and knowing when I'm at my limit. So that's the main thing for me. So I have a question for everyone as far as the action behind care. How can we and others in the helping profession provide care for the individual families within our communities during COVID-19?
I think that's a great question, Tamika. As we wait for those to type their responses, I think that's a really great question because it really.
Okay. Someone wants me to repeat. I'm sorry, Olivia.
Okay.
How can we and others in the helping profession provide care for our individual families and families within our communities during COVID-19? Ask for what is needed. Okay. Find resources close to home and share. That's very good.
I like that response. It says that we need to stay the course.
Yes.
I think that was great that, I think we've all been talking about how we've had to make adjustments. And obviously we need, focusing on ourselves, on our individual families, but that the work still has to continue, which is why we wanted to talk about family engagement. But we need to stay the course and continue the work. Like the work still has to get done, but we want to make sure that we're doing it in a very mindful and intentional way. And so thank you for whoever shared that comment.
Okay, one that I found interesting. Listen carefully to hear what they need, even when they don't express explicitly.
Oh, wow, that's good.
Yes, that is really good. I know what I'm finding from being on Facebook. Like I said, I found out a lot of information there, but I found that a lot of people are ashamed to ask. They are. I've seen plenty of posts where, people have run into issues, they need diapers or milk or any of that. And they will reach out to one person in particular who they kind of, once again, they have this trust within this person. So they felt comfortable to go to that person. And with permission from the person, they were able to share the need on social media. And when I say the outpouring of, support it was unbelievable. So that what she just stated, just making sure you pay attention, because a lot of people are afraid to admit that they need help during this time.
Absolutely. We are approaching the final minutes of our presentation. If there aren't any additional comments, we're going to start to wrap and close up, but I just want to first say thank you to definitely Amy and Amanda, who kind of joined our impromptu panel, if you will, and shared their insight and their expertise. And thank you to all of you who have been sharing your comments and your thoughts. We have one last request, excuse me, I'm jumping ahead of myself, and that's to just remind everyone about the use of your 4C's Action Step Guide. We really do hope that you were able to follow along with the guide. And if you weren't able to do it during the training, that you take it and maybe continue to reflect on the 4C's and figure out a plan for yourself, whether it's yourself, your family, or if you're within an organization, how we can use these 4C's within organizations to carry out the 4C's. I think that was my last request. Was there anything else you wanted to share on the 4C's guide, Tamika, before I make final closing statement?
No, I just want to say thank you to everyone and to just continue doing everything that you're doing right now and to remember to take care of self.
Absolutely. If there are any questions about the information we shared today, if anyone would like to just reach out to us for additional support, even about the action steps, the 4C's, want to share additional insight, we are both available here, our email addresses, so please stay in contact with us, reach out. We would love to stay connected with you. Also want to remind you that this training will be added to our GRScan YouTube page, and that each of you will receive an email link with this training, the PowerPoint slides, as well as the link to the evaluation form. And please, if you have an opportunity, we would love if you can fill out that evaluation form, because we do value your feedback. Thank you again for joining us. We look forward to meeting you again. And as Tamika just said, please take care of yourself.
So is that it?
Okay, I think, yeah, Tamika, if you can stay on for just a few minutes, or we're being asked to stay on for a few more moments. You're welcome, everyone. You're certainly welcome. It was our pleasure as well. You're welcome.